When my grandfather passed away 5 years ago, I inherited 40 acres of pristine lakeside land nestled deep in rural Missouri. At the time, I barely acknowledged what it meant. I was too buried in city life, climbing the IT ladder in Austin, paying rent for an apartment that cost more than it was worth. I kept the property taxes paid and the deed tucked in a fireproof safe, a relic of family history I assumed I'd revisit someday. Someday arrived the moment my burnout hit its peak. I was done staring at screens all day and listening to corporate jargon about optimizing synergy. I needed fresh air, fishing rods, and silence. And so, I packed up my SUV with tools, supplies, and enough coffee to survive the woods, and headed toward a place that still had my last name etched into the mailbox. Henderson. The drive up was like reversing time. Asphalt turned to gravel, and cell signal dropped to zero. The moment I saw the cabin, perched modestly on the edge of Lake Winderlin, something in me exhaled. A rustic A-frame with a sun-bleached wooden deck, a crooked old dock, and a tin chimney that still bore soot stains from my granddad's final winters. This place wasn't luxury, it was legacy. I got to work like I was on autopilot. The dock was half sunk on the right side, leaning like it had too much to drink. I pulled up my sleeves, started repairing it with new boards I brought from town. My hands blistered within an hour, but for the first time in years, I didn't care. The ache felt honest. While I hammered in the third beam, I caught myself grinning at the lake. Glassy, still, reflecting a sky so clean it hurt to look at. That's when I heard the engine. I turned around and saw a white Ford Explorer slowly crawling down my gravel path like it owned the place. 3 more cars followed. The lead one parked right beside my pickup, and 4 people emerged. 2 men in identical polo shirts, a woman with a clipboard and camera, and another woman. Trim, impeccably dressed, blazer on in 80-degree heat, face set like someone who'd smelled something offensive. She was the one who walked right up to me, heels crunching on the gravel. "Good afternoon," she said sharply. "I'm Karen, president of the Pine Lake Estates HOA. I blinked, not understanding. "Sorry, what now?" Karen extended a thick manila folder toward me like it was some sacred decree. "Your property is in violation of several HOA regulations. This dock, for one, is unregistered. You'll need to dismantle it. Also, you'll need to vacate the premises until your compliance status is resolved." I stared at her, genuinely baffled. "You're kidding, right?" She wasn't. Behind her, one of the polo guys took out his phone and began taking pictures of my cabin like it was a crime scene. The woman with the clipboard started muttering something about unauthorized exterior structures and safety risks. Karen, unfazed by my silence, flipped open the folder and pulled out a color-coded map. "You see this?" she said, pointing at a shaded area that supposedly included my land. "You fall under the jurisdiction of Pine Lake Estates. That means we have governance over what happens here. The architecture, dock permits, even occupancy rules. This is all enforceable." I stepped back, stunned. My grandfather bought this land before most of you were even born. I've got the deed, the county survey, the tax records. I'm not in your HOA. I've never signed anything. Karen smiled without warmth. "Doesn't matter if you signed. It's about the boundaries. If you're in the zone, you follow the rules." I didn't yell. I didn't throw the hammer, though I wanted to. I just looked past her, at my lake, my dock, my grandfather's cabin. And for the first time, I realized someone was trying to take it from me. Quietly, bureaucratically. And I knew one thing for damn sure. They weren't going to get away with it. A week later, I returned to the cabin with a duffel bag over my shoulder and the kind of excitement that only comes from the thought of escaping emails and car horns. I was planning to spend the whole weekend fixing up the roof and maybe wet a fishing line if the dock held. I pulled into the driveway humming to myself, coffee still hot in the cup holder. But the smile on my face died the moment I saw it. There was a chain across my cabin's front steps, and not just any chain. This one was bolted into the ground, looped through the handrail, and fastened with a thick padlock the size of a hockey puck. Hanging from the chain like some cursed welcome sign was a laminated notice in bold red letters. Notice of non-compliance. Occupancy suspended. 14 days to vacate under HOA Code 4.7c. Entry is unauthorized. My heart sank. At first, I genuinely thought someone was playing an elaborate prank. I stepped out of the car and walked up to the door, still half expecting to hear someone yell, "Gotcha!" from behind the trees. But no one came. Instead, from behind a large oak, 2 men in security uniforms emerged, with HOA logos stitched onto their chests like they were federal agents. One of them raised a hand as if he were directing traffic. "You'll need to step away from the porch, sir." "Sir?" I repeated, stunned. "This is my house." "Access to this structure has been suspended pending compliance review," he replied, like he was reading from a script. "We've been instructed to restrict entry until further notice from the board." I nearly laughed, until I saw the HOA-branded golf cart parked off the gravel, half hidden behind the brush. These people weren't joking. I tried to explain. Again. Calmly. "I am the legal owner of this property. I'm not part of any HOA. I have my deed in the glove compartment, if you want to see it." They didn't even blink. "That's not something we're authorized to review. You'll have to speak with the board." I backed away, fuming. Fine, but I'm documenting everything. I pulled out my phone and started recording, capturing the padlocked chain, the sign, the uniforms, the smug expressions. I narrated as I walked around to the back, where the dock was cordoned off with bright yellow plastic tape reading, "Restricted Area. Under Compliance Review." It looked like a murder scene. Even the old bench my grandfather built had a violation notice stapled to it for being non-compliant seating. Then it hit me. They weren't just locking me out. They were staking a claim, dressing the land like it belonged to them, like I was the squatter. I dialed the sheriff's department, praying someone with a badge would bring sanity back into this surreal mess. When the deputies arrived, 2 young guys who looked like they still played video games in their patrol car, I laid out everything: the ownership, the documents, the trespassing, the goddamn chain. One of them scratched his chin. "Yeah, this is probably going to have to go through civil court. If they've filed anything official with the county, we can't override it without a ruling." I stared at him, stunned. "So they can just padlock my home and you're telling me to lawyer up?" "Afraid so. Happens more than you'd think. HOAs love to test the line." He looked genuinely sorry and powerless. As they left, I stood in front of my own door, locked out, watching 2 random men patrol my land in golf cart rotations like I was the trespasser. That night, I slept in my truck, under a "No Trespassing" sign nailed to my own tree, by people who didn't even own the damn bark. I've never been a guy who loves legal paperwork. Like most normal people, I preferred contracts short, text messages shorter, and the words "county records" as far from my inbox as possible. But when someone locks you out of your own damn cabin and puts guards on your dock like you're smuggling moonshine, suddenly the fine print becomes your best friend. That Monday, I drove straight into town and found myself in a small office with a loud printer and a lawyer named Amber Johnson. Sharp suit, sharper voice, and the look of someone who eats overconfident HOA presidents for breakfast. I told her everything: the chain, the uniformed guys, the party line from the police. She leaned back, arms crossed, expression unreadable. "Let's see what they've stepped in," she said, and we dove in. The first stop, County Land Registry. And that's where the first bomb dropped. My grandfather hadn't just owned the cabin and a little shoreline. He had purchased the entire surrounding basin nearly 50 years ago, including a chunk of water rights and access paths that HOA members had apparently been using for decades. Without realizing, they were trespassing every time they launched a canoe. Amber scanned the deeds like she was reading Holy Scripture. "Your grandfather was smart," she murmured. "He didn't just buy land. He recorded every square inch, including rights of ingress, egress, and sole development control. And he filed restrictions preventing automatic annexation into any residential district." Translation? I wasn't in the HOA. Never had been. Legally, couldn't be. They couldn't force me to join, couldn't regulate my cabin, and, get this, every dock, storage shed, and gravel road they'd installed near the lake over the years, built on my land. I stared at the map Amber unrolled on the table, color-coded and terrifyingly detailed. It looked like a war plan, and the HOA had invaded hard. Turns out that dock they called community property? Mine. The boathouse they bragged about in brochures? Mine. Even the gravel loop they used for kayak drop-offs? All within my boundary line. My grandfather had effectively gifted me lordship over every inch they now claimed to own. We checked building permits next. Not a single request filed by the HOA for construction on any of those features. Amber tapped her pen against her notepad. "You've got them. Hard. They've been operating on stolen ground for years." I couldn't help but let out a short, shocked laugh. "So let me get this straight. They tried to evict me from land they've been illegally squatting on." She smiled. "We're going to bury them in filings. But first, let's make sure they know just who they're messing with." I left her office with a folder thicker than a phone book and a fire in my chest. I'd arrived at that cabin hoping for peace. Now, I was gearing up for war, and I held the high ground. If I thought Karen and her HOA army would retreat gracefully after I uncovered their legal overreach, I was sorely mistaken. They didn't retreat. They doubled down. It started subtly. A letter slid under my truck's windshield wiper while I was at the hardware store in town. No return address. Just a plain envelope with bold, impersonal font. Immediate action required. Failure to comply will result in escalated proceedings. Inside, another HOA notice. This time with a printed signature from Karen herself and an attached document she apparently filed with the local zoning board. She was petitioning to have my land reclassified as a shared recreational easement, essentially trying to turn my private lakefront into public access for Pine Lake Estates. Amber nearly laughed herself out of her chair when she read it. This woman's not just bold, she's professionally delusional. But Karen wasn't done. No, she wanted a spectacle. 3 days later, I pulled into my gravel road and found a portable toilet stationed directly beside my cabin, complete with a Pine Lake HOA sticker and a sign taped to the front. For HOA community use. Placement authorized by HOA president. I stood there blinking, trying to process how someone thought dropping a public restroom on my front yard was a power move. Then came the flyers, printed in glossy color, stuffed into every mailbox in a 5-mile radius. At the top, "Warning, unauthorized occupant at lakefront property. Please stay safe and report any suspicious activity." There was even a grainy photo of me from a distance, taken, no doubt, by one of their HOA drones disguised as a dog walker. According to the flyer, I was a non-compliant, transient figure obstructing safe community lake use, and the HOA had no choice but to pursue legal and civic channels to protect their interests. My neighbors started giving me side-eye at the gas station like I was some squatter with a meth lab in the woods. And then came the final straw, the lawsuit. Filed in county court, stamped, and delivered to Amber's office with all the theatrical flair of a Broadway premiere. Karen's legal team, or whoever she scraped off Craigslist to pose as one, claimed that my land had historical community value and should be seized under a doctrine I'd never even heard of: implied neighborhood equity. Amber read that part twice and said flatly, she made that up. But it didn't matter. Now we were officially in a legal battle, which meant depositions, filings, counterfilings, hearings, the whole bureaucratic dance. And Karen? She was basking in it. She posted in the HOA Facebook group every day with passive-aggressive updates like, Pine Lake remains vigilant in protecting our shores from unauthorized occupation. Community safety comes first. Someone even made merch. I'm not kidding. I saw a lady at the general store wearing a t-shirt that read, Lake Life, HOA Strong. They wanted a war. Fine. But they forgot one thing. I came prepared. I wasn't just sitting on a deed. I had surveys, expert witnesses, aerial footage, old-timers ready to testify, and Amber, who now referred to Karen exclusively as the discount dictator. We started drafting our response, because if Karen thought she could claw her way across my property, she was about to get bitten back. And hard. I didn't think anything Karen could do would surprise me anymore. I thought the portable toilet was her peak performance. I was wrong. It was a Saturday, a rare Missouri weekend when the sun wasn't trying to roast your face off, and the breeze off the lake smelled like cedar and early summer. I'd just spent the morning stacking lumber for a new tool shed, approved by no one but me, thank you very much, when I heard the sound of music. Not the gentle strumming of an acoustic guitar. No, this was bass-thumping, mic-checking, beer-can-cracking party music. I stepped around the cabin, and what I saw made me freeze. My dock, was covered in folding tables, helium balloons, a rented sound system, and about 40 people dressed like they were at a 4th of July barbecue hosted by Martha Stewart and local fascists. A giant vinyl banner fluttered over the water. Pine Lake HOA Democracy Festival, celebrating community unity. I blinked. One of the tables was a cotton candy station. Kids were running around with HOA face paint on. Some guy in swim trunks was cannonballing into the lake. My lake, from my dock. A woman was setting up a taco bar. There were actual lawn games on my grass, one of which appeared to be a dunk tank labeled Dunk the Dissenter. And there she was, Karen, on a temporary stage, in a powder blue suit, holding a wireless microphone like she was emceeing the county fair. Thank you all for coming out today, she called out cheerfully. This is what community looks like: unity, joy, shared space, and respect for order. Even when some people, she gestured vaguely toward the trees, clearly meaning me, forget that the lake belongs to all of us. The crowd cheered. I walked forward slowly, heart pounding, phone in hand, filming every square inch of this circus. I was recording for evidence, yes, but mostly because no one in court would believe this actually happened without footage. A woman tried to hand me a free hot dog. I stared at her like she was offering me a live snake. I kept walking. "Excuse me," I said, raising my voice. "Does anyone here realize this is private property?" That was the moment Karen turned toward me with the calm confidence of a substitute teacher kicking a student out of detention. "Mark," she said into the mic, "so glad you could join us. Everyone, this is the gentleman who insists this lakefront isn't community property." A few people chuckled. Someone booed. They booed me, on my own damn lawn. Karen continued, Now, Mark, if you'd like to join in and register with the HOA, we could find a path forward. We're reasonable people. I took one more step, and that's when it happened. One of her security volunteers, a 20-something guy in aviators and cargo shorts, put a hand on my chest. "Can't let you on the dock, man," he said. "Liability reasons." I looked down at his hand. I looked up at his face, and I snapped. "Touch me again, and you're going in that dunk tank head first." He moved his hand. I walked onto my own dock. Chaos followed. Karen's voice rose over the mic. "Mark, you are trespassing on an HOA-designated community event. You are violating crowd safety protocol." I turned toward the camera on my phone and said clearly, "For the record, I am standing on my legally owned dock. I have not invited any of these people. They are trespassing. This is all being documented." The man at the taco bar actually dropped his ladle. A few folks in the crowd started murmuring. I saw confusion ripple through the guests. People suddenly looking down at their red Solo cups like they'd been tricked into drinking from a crime scene. That's when the sheriff showed up. Thank God someone had called them. Maybe Amber. Maybe a confused guest. 2 deputies stepped onto the property and started separating people. When I showed them the deed and pointed to the no trespassing signs, the lead deputy just muttered, "Unbelievable," and radioed for backup. Karen was still trying to give a speech when the officer took her aside. "Ma'am," he said flatly, "you are currently hosting an unauthorized gathering on private property. You and your group need to vacate immediately." Karen looked like someone had just stepped on her cat. "But we have a permit," she blurted. "For the county park across the lake," the deputy replied. "This isn't county land. You're on Henderson property. You'll need to leave. Now." The party unraveled in real time. The cotton candy machine shut down mid-spin. The dunk tank was abandoned. Someone spilled a tray of margaritas into the grass. Karen, humiliated but defiant, tried to salvage her dignity as people packed up. She shot me a glare that could have melted asphalt, but I didn't care. I stood on my dock, sun on my shoulders, watching as every single invader retreated. And then I did something petty. I reached down and tore the Democracy Festival banner clean off the railing. I folded it, tucked it under my arm, and said, "Thanks for the donation. I'll use it as fire starter." The courthouse in Pine County isn't a grand building. No marble pillars, no towering dome, just a brick box with old wood paneling and vending machines that still take quarters. But on the day of the trial, it might as well have been the Supreme Court, because everything was on the line. I wore a suit. First time in years. Amber told me not to smile too much. "You're not here to make friends. You're here to win your land back." She walked beside me in a tailored black jacket and heels sharp enough to puncture steel, holding a briefcase that could have doubled as a battering ram. Karen was already inside when we entered. Front row, flanked by her legal team, 2 men in ill-fitting suits who looked like they'd rehearsed their opening statement in the parking lot. She didn't look smug today. She looked tense, but she still managed to give me a thin-lipped grin as I passed, like she thought this was a high school debate and not a war she was about to lose. The courtroom filled up quickly. HOA members, local reporters, even a few curious townsfolk. One guy I recognized from the taco bar incident brought popcorn. I gave him a nod. Then the judge entered. Gavel. Silence. The trial began. Karen's side went first. Their opening argument was a masterpiece of nonsense. They claimed historic use, community reliance, and something they called emergent jurisdiction. One of her lawyers even said, "The lake has been emotionally part of Pine Lake Estates for years." Amber didn't even object. She just let them dig the hole deeper. Then it was our turn. Amber stood like she'd been waiting her entire life for this. She opened the folder and addressed the room, in a voice that could cut through concrete. "Your Honor," she began, "what we have here is not a misunderstanding. It is a systematic, intentional trespass against a lawful property owner, my client, Mr. Mark Henderson." She laid it all out. The original deed from my grandfather, stamped and notarized. The aerial maps showing the HOA docks built on my soil. The county records proving I was never part of the HOA, and legally couldn't be. Videos from the party. Security footage from the day they chained my cabin shut. Testimony from 2 local surveyors and 1 elderly neighbor who said, "That lake's been Henderson's since Jimmy Carter was president." Then Amber dropped the bomb. She produced a signed affidavit from a former HOA board member, anonymous until now, who stated under oath that Karen had known the land wasn't theirs for over a year, and had pushed forward anyway, saying, quote, "He's just one guy. He won't fight us." You could feel the shift in the room. The judge looked at Karen like he'd just caught her sneaking out of the liquor cabinet. "Is that true, Mrs. Blake?" he asked. Karen stammered something about interpretation of boundaries. The judge didn't buy it. After a short recess, he returned with his verdict. And oh, what a verdict it was. This court finds that Mr. Henderson is the sole legal owner of the land in question, including the lakefront, docks, and surrounding structures. All HOA claims are void. Furthermore, the HOA is ordered to dismantle any and all unauthorized structures on Mr. Henderson's property at their expense. Mrs. Karen Blake is hereby removed from her position as HOA president. Additionally, the HOA is to pay damages in the amount of $1.8 million for unlawful trespass, defamation, and property interference. A separate criminal investigation into document falsification will proceed under state jurisdiction. I didn't move, didn't blink. Karen just stared at the floor. One of her lawyers packed up without a word. Amber leaned over and whispered, "Game. Set. Doc." It's been 3 months since the verdict, and I've got to say, nothing tastes sweeter than justice served cold, grilled over hickory, and washed down with a cold beer on your own damn dock. I rebuilt the pier. Not just repaired, rebuilt. Reinforced the beams, polished the planks, added built-in seating and solar lights that flicker like campfire embers at night. It's not just a dock anymore. It's a monument, and just above the path leading down to it, I installed a handcrafted wooden sign, burned into the grain with a branding iron. Mark's Dock. By invitation only. Trespassers will be mocked, then prosecuted. The irony isn't lost on the neighbors. A few of them, the ones who never liked the HOA's iron grip, have started stopping by to shake my hand, bring pie, ask if they can come down to fish. I let them, the cool ones, the ones who never wore HOA-strong shirts. The rest? Well, they can enjoy the view from a respectful distance. Last Saturday, I threw a party. My kind of party. Barbecue smoker going full throttle. Jazz playing from the new speakers. Coolers packed. And a big, obnoxious, inflatable flamingo floating in the water just for the hell of it. Even Amber came. She brought bourbon and a folder labeled Future HOA Defense Plans, just in case. She toasted from the dock like she was christening a ship. Then, as the sun dipped over the lake, I raised my glass and said, loud enough for the whole shoreline to hear, "To community, the kind you build, not enforce." The crowd laughed. Someone shouted, "Long live Lord Henderson!" But the cherry on top? Later that evening, I noticed a familiar silhouette standing at the end of the gravel road. Karen. No clipboard. No golf cart. Just standing there, watching from behind the tree line. We locked eyes. I gave her a two-finger salute, turned around, and cannonballed off the dock like a 10-year-old. Because this is my lake now, my cabin, my rules. And if you want to step onto this dock, you'd better bring beer and a good attitude.